Hello, welcome and welcome back. This is Jacob, and today we're going to be continuing the file narration series with the characters' voice lines on this channel, featuring a small little countdown series towards the release of the Stultifera Navis side story in a couple of days. This is the second video in line out of 6. The final video will be on the same day after the release of the side story. But today, we're gonna be looking at the full file and voice files of Operator Mizuki. Yesterday we looked at Operator Whisperain, and Operator Mizuki here is pretty much in a similar boat when it comes to his origins. Namely, he is, just like Whisperain, a Aegirian Sea-Terror Seaborn hybrid, so to speak. And unlike for Whisperain, where it's vaguely hinted at that she might be, or rather is, a hybrid of the two, Mizuki's file will very well confirm that, especially his operator file. Now, one thing I want to say here at the beginning is that once I'm done reading the file, I will go a bit about, go back here to this screen and just talk a bit about the naming sense of his skills and traits, because just like for many operators in this game, the naming convention for skills and how they are evolving essentially as they go from 1 to 3 or 1 to 2 at least, they do tell a story, and in Mizuki's case kind of paint a psychological profile, and we'll go into that. But for now, let's begin this segment with the usual thing of just quickly looking over the character. From personal perspective, I cannot really say much about him as a unit, considering I have very rarely used him. I have mostly used him just for both his paradox simulation and a handful of other places where he was, where he had a place to be used. But it's mostly down to what he is very useful for. Now, first of all, he has 0 block, which means every single melee unit will just walk through him, which is fine considering he has almost non-existent health even at this stage and level, but he does hit, even by default, a lot of area around himself. His traits, on the other hand, give him a 50% physical and arts dodge, which is quite nice. He has a less likely chance to be targeted by enemies innately after being deployed, which is also great. And you would think like, okay, if melee units are walking through him, why would he have a physical dodge? There are ranged units, they can still pick him up if he is in range. And that obviously goes the same for drones and anything else. So it has its uses to be a dodge specialist in some capacity. His other 2 traits work well together. His first trait gives him additional attack, arts attack damage against targets that are on low HP, while his second one is giving him additional 10% attack if the target is 50% or less, so they are pretty much working in tandem together. The other 3 skills are pretty much, all 3 are pretty much useful, very useful. His first one can store up to 2 charges, boosts his first talent up by 2.3 times, and yeah, that's already large, especially the 230% attack on level 7. Then we have his second skill that gives him a 1-second bind that on targets that he hits, lasts for a couple of seconds, gives him an attack boost, and his first talent can hit 1 additional target. Meanwhile, his third skill, oh boy, first off, it slows him a bit down. It does give him a huge attack boost, basically doubling his attack. He can hit 2 more targets with his basic talent. He gets a stun for a second for everything he hits. But the biggest downgrade on the, well, the biggest negative on this scale is the 15% health loss every time he uses it, every time he attacks rather, because he needs to hit 3 or more enemies with it. So mark, if you want to use him against a single or just 2 targets at once, have a healer on him. Otherwise, this precious little boy will die. And speaking of the attack range expansion that he gets with this attack, this would pretty much be it. It's funny how much it resembles, if you go back to Whisperain's video from yesterday, how much it resembles Whisperain's range of healing to a degree. But unlike Whisperain, who has a fall off on healing on the outer edges of her range, he, on the other hand, hits everything equally inside of the range. And finally, before we go into the file, let me just address that I absolutely love this art for this character. Namiya-sensei, this is amazing. As someone who loves eldritch bullshit, having this little precious little boy inside of this cacophony of madness around him and eldritch terror and horror, 10 out of 10. Good shit. Thank you very much for this. I fucking love it. But yeah, let's get into his file. And like I said, once I'm done reading his file, I'll go over the naming of his skills, because oh boy does it tell a story. For the voice files later, he does for now only have a Japanese VA, so you will have to pay attention to that, but there is also a single voice file where I would like to add something at the end of this video on top of it, which is an interesting little tidbit to add into the whole mix that he already brings with him. But let's begin with the file, shall we? So, basic info. Codename Mizuki, gender male, combat experience none, place of birth Higashi, date of birth March 22nd. Race Aegir, height 161 centimeters, and infection status. Medical tests have confirmed that no infection is present. And yes, I would like to point out for people who know the map and are like, wait, he's from Higashi but he's still Aegir? I mean, obviously, but also Aegir is a country that exists underwater and is... I don't actually know how far it spreads. From the recently shown Terra 3.0 map, which includes Aegir, I remember remotely that the Aegir territory was shown south of the continent of Terra, but I can't really remember if there was anything to the very far east, because Higashi is on the east. But again, immigration. Anyway, continuing. Physical exam. Physical strength, standard. Mobility, normal. Physical resilience, standard. Technical acumen, normal. Combat skill, normal. And Originium arts assimilation, flawed. And 2 out of 2 for now. We have 2 characters in a row where I have flawed somewhere in the exam. But this time we have a flawed on Originium arts assimilation. And we'll get up into that in the file itself. So let's continue. Profile. Mizuki came in contact with some of our operators in the Bolivarian city of Dosales and accompanied them back to the landship. After preliminary operator-related interviews and inspections, he was approved for a temporary stay. His learning ability is rather exceptional, and at this stage he is suitable for civilian work, and we may consider training him to become an operator. After further investigation and evaluation, he was approved for a long-term stay aboard the landship. Clinical analysis. Imaging tests reveal clear, normal outlines of internal organs, and no abnormal shadows have been detected. Originium granules have not been detected in the circulatory system, and there is no sign of infection. At this time, this individual is believed to be uninfected. Cell Originium assimilation 0%. This individual shows no signs of Originium infection. Blood Originium crystal density 0.07 units per liter. This individual rarely comes into contact with Originium. Warning: insufficient clearance. Higher authorization from the medical department is needed to view certain detailed psychological parameters. Interesting. Archive file number 1. Mizuki, according to his own account, was born in a remote village near the coast of Higashi. When he was young, his village was razed, looted and ransacked by deserters turned bandits from the nearby mountains. As he lay lying amongst the ruins and corpses, he was fortunate enough to have been saved by a traveling elder, who then took him to the nearest nomadic city for treatment. The process was actually a detour for us. After all, Rhode Island can't just take in strange children or any old runaway. We contacted local operators via messengers to cross-check the region's records, confirming that there was a case of bandits slaughtering, razing and burning an entire village some 10-odd years ago. At the time, when the authorities were tipped and moved to apprehend the bandit gang, they discovered all that remained was a few semi-conscious individuals, babbling incoherently while curled up in their makeshift dens. When pressed about the whereabouts of their fellow perpetrators, phrases such as "I don't have it" and "don't eat me." Oh, pardon, I skipped the line, Jesus Christ. When pressed about the whereabouts of their fellow perpetrators, these people only stared back with horror, shouting broken phrases such as "I don't have it" and "don't eat me." As strange as the situation was, the trail went cold and the authorities were no longer able to track down the other perpetrators, leaving the case in limbo. Neither here nor there, who could object to taking in a polite, well-behaved boy who never causes trouble? Not that I've got anything against our rowdier, less well-behaved troublemakers. Archive File Number 2. During the investigation, our operators learned Mizuki had been an apprentice in a local restaurant after being rescued as a youth. Though these events occurred many years ago, the restaurant owner was more than glad to talk about the past upon our operator's request. At first, the owner saw Mizuki as a thin and feeble country boy, but discovered that he was unexpectedly nimble with his hands and feet, and was an exceptionally fast learner with an even greater knack for cooking. His savvy earned him the praise and acceptance of the head chef, and some of his suggestions to adjust the condiments and portions of certain dishes were accepted, to the great acclaim of customers. Unfortunately, the dishes Mizuki made with his own hands always went somewhat awry, and after many failures, Mizuki left this matter behind without regret. As a matter of fact, we tried to get him to show us some of his handiwork, and well, how should I put this? The food itself was in line with his own self-assessment, the freshness and vitality of the dish's ingredients having been retained and fishy odors eliminated and seasoned to perfection. Yet despite the final product clearly being static, the food gave off the impression of life within it, which made it difficult for diners to enjoy, but for the more courageous colleagues who were able to try the food, they could only praise the flavor. Though I have no hard proof and this is just a hunch of mine, but did he use some special method to lock in the freshness of the ingredients and in the process also fix a portion of the ingredients' vital force as a form of nutrient? Archive File Number 3. I don't look at all like a kid from the 6th dressed like this. Well, money isn't much of an issue for me nowadays, but I'll admit, things were rough back then. After all, I didn't exactly have a lot of choice for ways to earn my keep at such a young age. Luckily for me though, a lot of people helped me along the way. The owner of the restaurant, the manager of the retro game store, the magazine editor, the young talent scout of the brokerage. Of course, there were some not so nice people along the way too. Still, they gave me what I needed to travel all over, to learn about all different kinds of stuff, and see all the incredible things in the lives of people across the world. That's its own reward. I guess you could say I followed the old man. The one I mentioned before, the old man who saved my life. He was always thinking about things, recording them, but wouldn't talk about them. As he used to say, we should absorb the good from around us and expel the bad from within us to better ourselves. And as long as everyone does it that way, we'll make the world under the stars that much more beautiful. I tried to live that, traveling the world and learning as much as I could to better myself. I eventually figured out this isn't just a theory, it's a truth of the world. It's easy for evil to wipe away good, but in the end, it's got nothing to offer. And so I realized humanity needs a lot more than just getting along and learning if it's going to make that future. Archive file number 4, Miscellaneous Records. Why go out of our way to spread suffering to our fellow man? Is it a weakness in the way our species lives, or is it due to a lack of bridging and communication between individuals? Or is it perhaps a fundamental inferiority planted within our species? What should we do to make ourselves better and more beautiful so that we may escape from all this? In this regard, even my like-minded colleagues have vastly different opinions, and make great haste to confirm their views. As for me, well, the older I become, the more confused I become, and the less I understand whether the things I've done to this point objectively move me closer to the answer. I've even come to doubt some of my original views, and I feel like I'm unable to answer with confidence. When confronted with calmly accepting one's demise, or struggling to live at any cost, which option is true fortitude? That is why I chose to go beyond the church in Iberia to embark on a pilgrimage, and to entrust this matter to the people that I would meet. To those people who had no choice but to make that choice. Of course, people tend to choose the latter option out of instincts, but most specimens have confirmed that instinct alone cannot rise to true fortitude. Those who chose to swallow the contents of the box I gave them in order to continue to live are easily crushed, easily destroyed, and easily lose themselves. But at least they still survive and have a healthier body and constitution that consumes fewer resources. However, these cases are not enough to answer my question. Can this truly count as making their self better? But within the most unlikely of happenstances, there will be those like this child, those who can attain victory through their own will and perseverance, and better their self. I have neither the qualification nor authority to teach them how to continue improving in the future, as they should have their own answers after enduring their trials. The best thing for me to do is to leave quietly and wait to bear witness to their future. Perhaps I've long lost the resolution and tenacity I had when I first walked down this path until I became the bishop. Perhaps the way I've explained this question has been but trickery, using deception and exploitation that cannot be refused. But no matter what, I am absolutely unwilling to give up the answer to the pursuit of kindness and beauty. Also, just a side note here, this bishop is not the same bishop as the one in Undertides. The bishop in Undertides was, I believe, called Quintus, if I remember right from reading the wiki, but yeah, I think it was Quintus. Or Quietus? I think it's Quintus. This is another completely different person, especially because Mizuki's background is from Higashi, and I think his name is being said somewhere, or he gets mentioned more. He definitely gets mentioned more in his operator record. So once again, once this file is over, before I go into his naming convention for the skills, go and read that one yourselves. It is, like I said, uploaded on the channel. But, continuing. Promotion file. Encrypted message. If you are seeing this information, it proves that you've at least realized the strategic value of the object's behavior. Let us use the unfitting term of mercenary for now. From the simulated data, and may even be planning to include him in your normal operational capabilities. Indeed, the information in the publicly available records surrounding this subject are largely vague and fabricated. This is also a result of the agreement we reached. As the guarantor and commander of this person, you are required to know more. In fact, most of the subject's actual results on our comprehensive examination reach or even exceed the excellent mark by the evaluation standards, with the exception of Originium Arts Assimilation. You should already be aware of this, yes, of the supplementary combat methods which he is unwilling to disclose too much. The methods that disrupt vision, hearing, and tactical perception, or even cause hallucinations, are not Originium Arts, but perhaps more biological in nature. Currently, we suspect some form of electrical signal or pheromone. Furthermore, the subject's performance on indices such as physical strength and fitness are likely not inferior to those of professional operators who've undergone lengthy training, and these lofty results are just what he can achieve with his body. Perhaps you might not thoroughly understand what the implications of these test results mean, but I must remind you, he is not one of our operators, nor can he become one of our operators. The subject can only secretly exist as the subject of Rhode Island Medical Department's Cooperative Observation Project, because in all sense of the word, he is an anomaly, and from the information we already have, I'm afraid that there are at least 20 paranoid researchers permeating all corners of this world, tirelessly working for the same beliefs, yet different purposes, increasing the number of cases similar to our subject, intentionally or otherwise. Though there are a few cases in which the subject has enough mental fortitude to not be overwhelmed by an overly powerful biological signal and turn into a thrashing sea terror, it doesn't matter if he's supported by his pure survival instinct or something altogether different. Now to get back to the point. The oropathy problem is the chief focus of Rhode Island, but humanity faces far more threats than just this, many of which have not yet made themselves visible. Therefore, we must ensure that our operators firmly stand with us and with humanity in facing the common problem of the future. As for this subject, there are some prerequisite questions that must be addressed. He may still have the opportunity to choose what he wishes to be, to help whoever he wishes to help, but he has not yet been able to make his own decisions. These are not simple matters, as we don't always understand ourselves correctly. Perhaps you'll be more than happy to provide him with more inspiration, or perhaps you'll want to give him the liberation of free thought. Before you found the answer to those questions, don't let him draw needless attention. This is to protect him, but also us. So yeah, this is his entire file, and now to go just slightly back and talk about the naming convention and how much these skills and talents are talking about him as a person. Well, let's go with this. Let's remember that he is potentially the sole survivor of a complete slaughter of his own village. So we have traumatic hysteria, which should talk about itself just by its name. Then we have counter-transference. Now this one is a bit more complicated because this is, if I remember right, the transference of a psychiatrist or something to the subject that that person is making up psychological profile of or doing counseling on. Basically, they are transferring their own feelings and aspirations to the subject, which again tells a lot because the person who saved Mizuki technically made him into a eager seaborn hybrid. So yeah, transference, and he also imprinted a bit of his own beliefs onto him, as Mizuki's files tells us. Then we have the skills. Awaken should pretty much talk about itself, probably in line of his awakening as a new person after the fusion of Aegirian and Seaborn cells. And the art is already beautiful and nightmarish with tentacles writhing from the bottom to the top. Then we have Prisoner's Dilemma. This one is a bit difficult. I can't remember what that one was talking about. I think if I remember right, this one is referring to the psychological state of someone who doesn't know if they should keep in line with what their captor, or rather their, captor, quotes, is telling them or having them do, or if they should do something else. It's like a what should I do moment kind of mind state. And then we have Moon in the Water. Now this is and especially by art, we have just writhing tentacles not knowing what the fuck is going on. Then we have a single core in the middle with tentacles suddenly going around it, and here we have the titular jellyfish symbol that he carries on himself in his art, plus the tentacles are now in a very beautiful pattern around it, like suggesting he found himself and his purpose, maybe. But then we have Moon in the Water. Well, Mizuki, from what I remember as well, in his trivia file, is roughly translating to moon, water moon? I think that was the way it was written there, but yeah, moon in water. But on the other hand as well, his name, I think when it's written in kanji and used as a person's name, literally translates to jellyfish. So there we go. There we have that. But yeah, it's very interesting how his skill naming and everything, and he's not the only one where his skills and passive talents are pretty much telling you a story about the character as a person. But let's now go into his audio files. And as I said, there is a particular audio file here which I would talk about when we are completely done with it. But yeah, it ties to certain things we know already, especially if you've been following the channel so far or have been following the game, for stories like the Darknights memoir story, yes, and the Walk in the Dust story, and some other tidbits of information here and there. But I will point out which voice line I'm referring to. For now, you guys get to enjoy and listen to Mizuki, and I will talk to you after we're done.
ケルシー先生が言ってたよ。ドクターが僕をそばに置くようになったら、それは僕を守ることを決めたんだって。でもドクター自身はそれが何を意味するか理解してないみたいだね。だけど僕にはわかるんだ。ケルシー先生は適当を言ってるわけじゃないってね。グルメ、漫画、ゲーム、そしてそれを作り出す人たち、みんな星空の下に散らばる歌なんだ。僕の旅の目的はそういうものを全部味わうこと、そしてそれを邪魔するものを片付けることだよ。あ、ドクター、ちょうどいいところに来た。これ食べてみて。食材の栄養と生命力を最大限キープできる極秘の調理法で作った刺身料理だよ。これ極東で流行ってたレトロゲームだよ。今はもうあんまり人気ないけどね。ドクターもやってみる？あの黄色い顔を周りのものを食べるように操作するんだ。でもたくさん栄養をとってパワーアップするまでは他の敵から獲物として狙われちゃうんだ。正義感？いや、ドクターは誤解してるよ。僕は別に悪人を何とも思ってないよ。でもみんなはいろいろ事情があって悪人に手を焼かされてるんでしょ？そんな時に悪人を消してあげれば誰も困らないし、みんなホッとするでしょ？ドクターの理屈はよくわからないけど、とにかくドクターが悪人って判定したやつだけ片付ければいいんでしょ？だってドクターはいい人だから。もしドクターが実は悪人だったらどうするか？やめてよ、そんなの困るんだ。だってそしたら 僕はドクターを時々感じるんだ。この館内には懐かしくてでもどこか馴染みのない、優しくてでも敵意に満ちた何かがあるって。ドクター、僕ちょっと不安だよ。ドクター、人の命を握ってる時ってどんな気分？もし僕ならすごくあったかく感じて、それで体が震えちゃうと思う。いやいや、ドクターが指揮官としてみんなの命を預かってる時の感想を聞いてるだけだよ。たまに思うけど、飲み込んだ食べ物と吸収した栄養が僕たちを作り上げたんなら、もし同じものを食べて同じことをしてたらどんどん同じになっていくのかなって。ドクター、僕たちにできるかな？ちょっと休んだ方がいいよ、ドクター。ほら来て、ここで寝てて。僕が毛布を取ってくるから。あ、ドクター、こんにちは。ケルシー先生が今日から僕はドクターの配下になるって言ってたよ。相変わらず正式なオペレーターとしては認められないみたいだけど、ドクターが手伝ってほしいことがあれば何でも力になるからね。これを吸い込んで消化すればいいんでしょ？頑張るよ。僕が認められたの？チームメイト同士僕が認められたの？これからはドクターともっといろんな場所に行って悪人を片付けていいってこと？
I apologize for that. My left click on the mouse is dying and I misclicked or double clicked. Pardon. Continuing.
あの時もこんな雨の日だったな。予想外の贈り物を受け取って僕は変わったんだ。でもあの人はこれからの将来とどうやって向き合えばいいかを教えてくれなかった。ドクター、君なら手を取って僕に教えてくれる？チームメイト同士でもみんなの前に出ない方がいい？わかった。ドクターの言う通りにするよ。ドクターのことも作戦に参加するみんなのことも影から守るよ。今回の作戦計画と秘密任務はと。間違いなし。あれが敵？なかなかうまそうに見えるね。ドクターの指示が僕の道しるべだよ。いつでもいいよ。ドクターはいつだって僕の居場所を見つけてくれるんだ。思うがままの戦術でいいよ。前菜代わりにもならないね。ごちそうさまでした。一体いつからこの職種はまやかしに過ぎないって錯覚してたの？悪とは打たれるべきだし、その執行人は必ず現れる。なんて手強い連中なんだろう。今回の作戦を消化するのには時間がかかりそう。また悪人の数を減らせたね。全部ドクターのおかげだよ。あれ？ドクター、何人か逃してるよ。僕が代わりに片付けてくるね。みんなの撤退を援護するなら手はあるよ。いや、援護するだけじゃダメだ。ここで悪人を全員始末しないと。何か美味しいものでも作ってみんなにリラックスしてもらうってのはどう？あれ？どうしたの？拍手！誰かに見透かされてるような気がする。アークナイツ。ドクター、僕が恋しかった？
Ah, what a precious little boy, yet very concerning with some things he says. Now, the thing I was referring to that I wanted to point out here is, I think it was this trust line. Yep. Sometimes it feels like there's something on this ship, familiar yet also foreign, gentle yet also seemingly full of hostility. Doctor, it makes me rather uneasy. Now, not fully spoiling here, obviously, plotlines and shit, just gonna talk about general things that have been covered on the channel so far and are part of older stories. In Arknights' memoir, we have, what's her name? Irene? Was it Irene? I think it was Irene, right? Using her special arts, which work through her eyes, to see, as she calls it, the shadows of people and people around her and pretty much see what they are. And she, at one point in the story, uses it to look at Rhode Island before they reach Rhode Island. and she sees something that is confusing her because she does not know how to put it into words. She's either looking at a giant corpse or she's looking at a giant skeleton, and she cannot put it into specific words of what the hell she's seeing. But she's clearly looking at the landship, or rather the still under construction landship of Rhode Island, or rather still being rebuilt considering it was excavated landship of Rhode Island. And in A Walk in the Dust we get a bit more of a backstory where it gets confirmed that Rhode Island has been found and is being brought back to operational life, so to say, by, I think, at the end of the story where Kotsit reads a letter from Theresa, if I remember right. Plus there are other points throughout the story, but this is definitely a vague sentence. But first off, let's address the fact that this freaking menu, especially because it has all of your things here, shortcuts, but essentially, why is there a giant freaking, I guess, whale or worm skeleton in the background? But yeah, anyway, obviously these are just my observations, not anything concrete. I'm just pointing out the things I have seen so far throughout the global version of the game, with reading and just seeing what other people point out as well when they see it. But interesting. It's a very vague line, but it could also not just refer to, if anything, living or whatever corpse or whatever the fuck is in the bottom of Rhode Island's uncharted places that are not present on any map of Rhode Island, but still exist. Plus, it could also refer to other things. Remember that we have Amiya on the ship. Remember that we have Kotsit on the ship. And a bunch of others who are usually always talked about in the background. So this line could refer to many things that exist on board of that ship. Not just Rhode Island itself. But it's definitely an interesting line, and I personally live for this shit when someone says something like that all of a sudden. But yeah, I think this will be it. Hopefully also no one has minded the music in the background. I switched the background lobby music to the vacation soundtrack, considering we did get Mizuki during a vacation kind of story, but kind of fits. But hey, what a nice beat to have to read about a character who is technically like half an eldritch horror. Still precious. For an eldritch horror, he's absolutely precious. But anyway, this will do it for today's episode. Tomorrow we will feature another character, and I kind of wonder, considering I very rarely see anybody ever talk or show fan art of that character, I wanna see in tomorrow's episode how many people actually remember that character exists and is tied to this whole business of Aegir and Aegir, Abyssal Hunter, and Sea Terror, Seaborn Mumbo Jumbo. But as I'm starting to lose my voice, I need to get a drink. Thank you all for listening. Like I said, we will continue this tomorrow in the next episode of this Countdown series. But for now, I hope you have a fantastical day, evening, morning, night, wherever you are. And I'll see you in the next video. Until then, bye bye.